Arguments over immunity for former President Trump in the federal election case have now wrapped up in the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. Trump's team claimed his actions on January 6th fell under his duties as president, saying he was, quote, looking for voter fraud. Trump's attorneys also echoed the former president's claims, telling the judge that prosecuting a former president would open a Pandora's box. The special counsel painted a picture of what they called a frightening future if presidents can't be held accountable for crimes.
Candidly, I think if the court gets to that second question, there are some hard questions about the nature of official acts. And frankly, as I think Judge Pan's hypothetical described, I mean, what kind of world are we living in if, as I understood my friend on the other side to say here, a president orders his SEAL team to assassinate a political rival and resigns, for example, before an impeachment? Not a criminal act. President sells a pardon, resigns, or is not impeached? Not a crime. I think that is extraordinarily frightening future, and that is the kind of, we're talking about a balancing and a weighing of the interests. I think that should weigh extraordinarily heavily in the court's consideration.
We have team coverage with senior reporter Catherine Faulders in Washington, ABC News Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas, ABC News Executive Editorial Producer John Santucci, and ABC News legal contributor Kim Whaley. John, Trump's attorney responded to that portion of what the special counsel is saying. Saying the real frightening future for them is that President Biden's Justice Department is currently prosecuting his political rival and prosecuting former President Trump. What do you say to that?
And this is what we have come to expect, right? That Donald Trump, the candidate, and Donald Trump, the defendant, are colliding in real time. And that is exactly what Donald Trump is doing out on the campaign trail, and his team is bringing that argument into the courtroom. Look, you mentioned right there at the intro, Diane, the Pandora box that Trump's team mentioned in court today. Trump himself used that statement on social media as he announced he was coming to this proceeding today, a proceeding, for the record, that he did not have to come to. This is an appeals proceeding. This is not a trial. This is procedural. Donald Trump is using this as a weapon to make the campaign about these trials, and anything they can do to keep the trials front and center. Look at the week ahead he has. He's there today. We understand that he's going to be heading off to Iowa to do an event tomorrow, but then he's back in a courtroom on Thursday again for another proceeding, Diane, he doesn't need to be in.
Kim, both sides here are arguing not just the law, what the law says, and how it should be interpreted, but what the consequences are of the outcome of this trial. They're both trying to paint this picture of this is dangerous territory ahead if you don't find in our favor. What stood out to you from those arguments?
Well, I think that Judge Pan, I believe, made the rhetorical point that, listen, are we talking about SEAL teams assassinating political rivals, et cetera? Donald Trump's argument is sweeping here. It really means that there aren't any limits on the ability of presidents to use a massive power of the office to commit crimes. And that's why I think they will probably lose. The wrinkle is that Trump's lawyers have to basically continue to peddle the big lie in order to make their argument. They're essentially saying he was pursuing potential election fraud when that, as a matter of fact, has been roundly debunked by his own administration, as well as, you know, in various court proceedings, et cetera. So the rhetorical point, as John indicated, probably scores some political points, but legally, you know, President Nixon lost similar arguments, President Clinton lost similar arguments, and Donald Trump has lost similar arguments in a civil action before this very court. He will lose, and I think the gloom and doom that the DOJ is painting is very, very serious, and I think that will halt the legal process in its tracks when it comes to immunity.
Pierre, what did you make of the judge's questions throughout this hearing and what they seem to be focusing on in their considerations?
Well, that was one of the more piercing legal questions that I can recall hearing, covering various court cases at various levels. The essential argument that the judge raised, again, one of the presiding judges in the case, was that if a president, even in an official act, ordered SEAL Team 6 to kill a political rival, that in itself isn't that a crime? And are you saying that presidential immunity would allow a former president never to be prosecuted for that action? So we took a step beyond from what the primary argument of the special counsel had been, which had been that Trump was acting in a personal nature as a candidate in seeking to block, in their minds, illegally the certification of Joe Biden as president. But then today, we entered into this new zone where the judges were just raising this question that even certain official acts while you're the president could, in fact, be illegal. And I think that was the most dramatic and most interesting moment in the case. And I think all the judges appeared to be somewhat skeptical that you can have, quote, complete immunity.
Catherine, we could hear audio from the courtroom, but we couldn't see it. You could, because you were there inside that courtroom. So what was it like inside?
So Trump, for his party, walked in about 5 minutes before this started, talking with his legal team, but appeared rather expressionless, didn't make any visible reaction when he walked through the door or when he was listening to the arguments from his attorney or watching the judges. Now, Diane, I think in terms of color here, it's also worth pointing out this is the third time that Trump has appeared in a courtroom with special counsel Jack Smith. Jack Smith was also there with more than a dozen members of his prosecution team. So the third time that they had been face to face there, the last time, of course, was when Trump was in this exact courthouse when he was arraigned. So there wasn't anything that I could at least see from my vantage point about Smith and Trump making eye contact directly, but definitely looking in the directions of either side here. Now, it was interesting. After Trump's legal team gave arguments, and then it was time for the special counsel to speak, the legal team and Trump became much more active in the room. Trump was actively writing on a yellow legal pad. From my vantage point, it seemed like he was writing in his typical Sharpie, passing notes with his lawyers, presumably writing notes about what the special counsel was saying until his lawyer, of course, then went up and gave that 5-minute rebuttal. So in terms of his emotions, not much, just looking at the judge. There was a time in there, Diane, when the special counsel prosecutor, James Pierce, used the phrase vindictive tit for tat to describe the prosecution, and Trump visibly shook his head in disagreement. Obviously, didn't love that phrase. But again, and as John pointed out too, he didn't have to come here. He didn't have to be here. He was in there for obviously more than an hour, and we know that he wants to speak about this, wants to give some remarks in some form. So we're keeping an eye out for that as well.
All right, Catherine Faulders, Pierre Thomas, John Santucci, and Kim Whaley, thank you all.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.